Let's take a look at some news. So this guy died. It may mean nothing to you. It means something to me because I was a scientific researcher in a somewhat medical field studying the way a human brain processes computer vision when this guy's scandal hit. He ran one of the major cancer research centers in the world, and one of the grad students, for somebody he looked over, cheated on his research. They said the guy was a genius and he found like 2 amazing things, but then he faked 7 more. And he deflected all the cancer research for a decade off into a blind alley looking for something which wasn't true. And that led to a huge scandal and hundreds of research papers having to be retracted and hundreds of people being in trouble. And it led to Congress acting. And I was a working scientific researcher when they told us we would have to keep all our notebooks to be audited by Congress to see if we were fraudulent, which didn't actually happen, but it got my attention. And that, I think, just began the exposure of the amount of scientific fraud, which has just gotten worse and worse and now is ridiculous. Now people are using AI to hunt through published scientific papers to see if the figures they use have been used elsewhere or just relabeled and repurposed from an inappropriate source, and they're finding thousands of research papers that are clearly fraudulent. And so it's a huge problem, and AI has, of course, made it much worse. And I remember when I was in this, you had to publish or you get fired, and so people cheat and publish. And I found out at that time, too, I had a student who was an escapee from the Soviet Union because he was Jewish, and he fled the Soviet Union. When he got to America, he felt very abused because he had to earn a whole new PhD in America. I was one of his graders involved in that process. And he said they wouldn't recognize his PhD from Russia. But later on, I found out that the standard procedure for getting a physics PhD in Russia was to just take an American PhD and translate it into Russian and put your name on it, which is why they weren't respected here. But anyway, this kind of stuff has been going on. And, you know, at that time, we thought science was a pure, clean place where nobody even thought things like that were happening, but they were. Anyway, and they're certainly happening now. There have been several supply chain attacks just this week. These guys got into the GitHub supply chain. Now, I'm not very good at sophisticated GitHub, but you can apply something called a GitHub Actions file, which automatically takes actions when people push to a GitHub repository. If there's a real software engineer among my class, I'd like to hear more about how this works, because I've never worked at the kind of company where you have hundreds of developers all pushing to a GitHub repository and reports being put out all the time, but that's what you do. And therefore, it can give you code execution in there. And he found a way to compromise one of the tokens, so they were able to, they stole the tokens and they're wandering from place to place, infecting more people. This happens a lot. And I think the thing that we've all become aware of in the last 3 to 5 years is if you use any software, your software uses libraries, and those libraries use more libraries, and pretty soon you're using hundreds of packages from God knows where, and you don't even know if they're up to date, and you don't even know if you trust those people. And those are all ways people can inject bad stuff into your code, which got all our attention because of the SolarWinds attack, when the Russians did that. They infected the SolarWinds project, and the legitimate update from the vendor poisoned a bunch of American machines and put them under Russian control, and a lot of them are probably still under Russian control. And that, I think, really woke people up to supply chain attacks. We now are aware of the risk, but there's still not a very good defense. So X now has encrypted chat features, which it never did before, but, you know, Elon Musk is an extremely untrustworthy character. I don't even use X at all. And he said he was going to originally make money by making it into your banking institution, and I would never trust him with my banking. I don't trust him with anything. I left the platform along with almost everybody in the information security community when he bought it. But now he's added encrypted chat, and encrypted chat does not remove the metadata from images you post, which is something it should do and that other encrypted chat messages do. This is how they got John McAfee. And John McAfee, who was a famous sort of a tax cheat and crypto enthusiast, was on the run. He let Vice magazine interview him, and they put a picture up of him, and they left the geolocation on the camera, which was on by default at that time. You had the latitude and longitude of every picture, so that's how he was arrested. Anyway, in general, it's considered best to remove that data, and you would think any privacy application would do that automatically, since obviously the reason you're using something like encrypted chat is because you do want to maintain your privacy. So they've got a point. This might be interesting. There is something called advanced protection in Android. There is a similar feature, has been in Apple for about 2 years, because Apple powerful attacks that take over Apple phones have been known since Jeff Bezos' phone, the head of Amazon, got hacked by the Prince of Saudi Arabia. All you have to do is spend $1 million and buy malware, and they can just send you a text message and totally take over your phone. And he leaked off embarrassing pictures of him naked with his girlfriend or something. And in response to that, Apple put on an enhanced security mode you can turn on your phone, intending to stop that kind of attack. And this looks like Android's attempt to do the same thing. And one thing it does is it limits what apps you can install, which is the main thing. In Android, there's a bunch of malicious apps in the App Store, and people load things from third-party sources. And so the main thing this seems to do is limit where you can install things from. But anyway, also in reboot, it'll reboot your device every 72 hours, which might help. Anyway, that turns on a few features, and maybe it would make you safer in case people are actually attacking you with powerful attacks, of which there are a lot. And of course, the most common one is the stalkerware ecosystem. There's now a bunch of stuff you can buy to put on a phone just to spy on everything someone is doing. The stuff is sold legally, although using it to spy on another person would be illegal unless that person is your employee or your child. But people are using it that way. And it's, I think, probably one of the major risks people have these days. So this is a strange one I'd never heard of. If you have a stream, and you have a live stream, like I have a live stream right now, actually. I'm live streaming over Twitch, and I know there is a private API key that I had to put in my OBS to perform this stream. And apparently, the Department of War, formerly the Department of Defense, has been publicly publishing the private keys to all their streams, which is a strange thing to do, but apparently they've been doing that, and therefore that means anybody else could take over the stream and stream data over it, and it would appear to come from you. So that's not good for someone who ought to be trusted like the Department of War, Department of Defense, although these guys, probably a little bit witty but probably true, say in fact these days most of what the government puts out is disinformation anyway, and the main consequence of this is they'd be able to lie, and if the truth comes out they'd be able to claim it was disinformation. But anyway, it is another shocking security failure by the U.S. government, which is very, very common. Government agencies are very bad at security. They make terrible mistakes all the time, which I think I've worked in government agencies. Anybody that has will understand why. You're just a chaotic place. Nobody really knows what they're doing. The technology is usually out of date. The people aren't very well trained, and people make mistakes all the time. Like this, WhatsApp. They fired their security boss. Their security boss said they were not being reported security flaws, so they fired him, which is a pretty common thing to do. At least that's his story. They say, oh, no, there's nothing wrong, everything's fine. But he said, he didn't inventory user data. They had unrestricted access for 1,500 engineers could get at everybody's data. So any one of them could make a mistake or be bribed. They didn't monitor the access. They didn't detect data breaches, and so on. It all sounds very plausible. Many companies are in this position. But you would think Meta would be one of the few that is so rich that they actually implement advanced defenses, and apparently not. So here's another supply chain attack. 18 JavaScript packages were poisoned with malicious software, and these things have like 2 million downloads a day or 2 billion downloads a day or some amazing number like that in Node Package Manager, like another crypto. And apparently all they did with it was make crypto mining software, which is relatively minor. They could have done anything. But anyway, it just makes it again clear, the supply chain is a huge problem. And nobody has a good solution. The U.S. government has for the last year or two been requiring a software bill of materials with every product, which lists all the libraries you're using, but there is not yet any way to use that to make sure that everything you're using is up to date or trustworthy. And it just came out last week that one of the major packages used by all kinds of Department of Defense software is maintained by one Russian. And that seems like a bad plan. I'm going to shut that door. People are shut up to yell again. This is how it goes. First we discover a problem, then we discover that it's a big problem and everybody has it, and it's a few years before we discover defenses. That's how things go in this field. All right, so anyway, that's enough news. Let me stop this.